Afternoon. Welcome to Eating Plebian. Today we are going to be making some chicken fried steak with beef mushroom gravy. I think you're going to like this one. There's a little bit of setup involved, but the results are absolutely worth it. Why don't you join me in and taking a look at the ingredient list. Starting off over on the stove, I've got my wide, high-sided skillet, a small skillet for baking a roux to make some gravy thickener. Don't worry about these two items. That's for my dinner later on. But more importantly, I've got a bunch of vegetable oil here I'm going to be using in order to do a semi-deep frying. It's only going to go halfway up to the side of the steak pieces that we're going to be putting in. So we will have to flip it over. So it's not a full deep fry, I guess. Now, we've got quite an assemblage of white powders. And so I've got to try to keep this straight in my head. But anyways, starting off over in what is going to be a first stage dredge, over here in the back right corner is 1 egg. I've got some half cup or roundabout there of heavy cream, and I've also got about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half of vinegar. That's actually cider vinegar, but doesn't matter that much. And that's because I don't have any buttermilk. It really seems strange that these days we really don't stock buttermilk like maybe our parents or grandparents did, but it's what it is. Now, I've got a teaspoon of baking powder, and then going to the dry side, I've got a cup of all-purpose flour. I've got a quarter cup of cornstarch. I've got also a teaspoon of baking powder, so 2 baking powders right there. And then on for the gravy, I have 2 cups of reduced sodium beef broth. I've got 1 tablespoon of Better Than Bouillon paste. It's much better than bouillon. This is not a paid or, promoted sponsorship. It's not a sponsorship at all. I just happen to recommend it. And then we've got a quarter cup each of butter and flour. That's going to make our thickener. 4 ounces of sliced mushrooms, salt and pepper, and I've got just a little over a pound of a top sirloin, and this top sirloin is going to be used, which is actually a very good cut for something along the lines of chicken fried steak, but usually you can get away with cube steak or top or bottom round, but you know what? I figured I had it and I wanted to make this. So there you are. In addition to additional equipment that you may need, I've got a meat mallet. No jokes. Let's get started. Now, ordinarily, I would start off by prepping the meat and running it through either a tenderizer or using the mallet over there and getting that ready. But actually, I want to clear myself off some space from the counter. This isn't the biggest one in the world. So I'm going to take my cup of all-purpose flour, and I'm going to add to that the quarter cup of cornstarch and the teaspoon of the baking powder. And we're just going to toss that right in there. And I'm also going to just kind of get this mixed in a little bit. We could also use additional seasonings in here if you wanted. If you have some sort of all-purpose seasoning, something along those lines that you want to put in about 3 to 4 tablespoons of that, you absolutely can. I'm going to set this here for just a moment. I'm going to take my egg, break it in. I'm thinking about putting stuff in there just for fun. Not having, like some sort of production company or director or whatever, means that I can make decisions, halfway through if I wanted. I might do that. So anyways, there is my heavy cream gone into there. My baking powder. The baking powder for the first stage dredge. I can get rid of that and that. And the vinegar, because lack of buttermilk. And we're simply just going to get this all mixed in. Get it all in there. You're not cooking a souffle or an omelet, so it doesn't have to be perfect. This is a wet dredge, but we do want to get it all incorporated. This is going to really make it nice and crispy. It's a great way to make it not just flour on the outside, and it's just a way to really level up any of your fried goods. All right, I need to reset for my cutting board, and I'll be right back. Ta-da! The wonders of time travel. Okay, so I've got my sirloin here, and I am going to take off just a little bit of fat in and around this meat. And one of the reasons that this is actually good to use is because you'll note that it is not like stricken through all over the place with large veins that some cuts can have. That's kind of a problem, because then the stuff starts falling apart. I'm going to turn this into 4 or 5 pieces, and just to kind of make them meal size, or at least serving sized. And I think I'll take that as one, and probably right down the middle there. Okay, so I'm going to take my meat mallet, no jokes, and we're simply just going to give this a little bit of a working over. It really does not require much. It's going to expand it just a bit. I'm not putting more than about 5 to 6 ounces worth of pressure. It's almost like it's allowing just the weight of the mallet itself to supply the striking force. I got a little bit of fat there. I'm going to remove that. There we go. So this is not something that is, completely get your aggressions out on, I'm afraid. You could use, as I said before, cube steak, in which case it's already run through that perforator machine that they have there in order to tenderize it. Again, but a sirloin, it really doesn't need it that much, so I don't need to go do all that trouble in sourcing that meat, because it's going to be fairly tender anyway. What we want is about a 1/2 inch, and that's largely what we've got after this procedure. So just a little bit more. You can tell that this one is even more tender than the other pieces. One, because of the little bit of fat that remains, and secondly, it's darker color, which means that it's more iron rich and that it's a muscle that's not worked quite as hard. It doesn't have those long sinews inside them, that the connective tissue that makes it really tough. All right, we are so almost there. Did I get that side? No, I didn't. Okay, well, that's gonna be a long one. That's all right. A little more fat there. Awesome. All right, 1 second. My next magical trick is I need to heat up my pan. So I'm going to set this at about medium low, and I'm going to put in maybe about 3 cups of my frying oil. Make sure to use a high temperature oil. You don't want to use extra virgin olive oil or stuff like that. Peanut, safflower, avocado oil, if you could afford it. Avocado oil is a tad more expensive. I'm not sure you'd want to use it for semi-deep frying. But that's going to warm up, and I have a thermometer up here. I want to take this up to 350 degrees, maybe even a little more than that. But because, when you put food in, it drops it down. The second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the heat on to my little small skillet, and this is where I'm going to make the roux. So I'm going to give that just a second. It's not going to take long in order to get it to a point where butter melts. And there's absolutely no reason whatsoever that I just can't throw it right on in. All right, there's that 1/4 cup of butter. We will probably be able to not have to use all of this roux for 2 cups of beef broth to make our gravy. And but I like to always make about 25% more than I think it will, just in case, for whatever reason, it doesn't thicken up as much as I would hope. So there's that. Well, my butter is about ready, and so I'm going to go ahead and grab my all-purpose flour, that 1/4 cup, and I'm just going to dash it all in. I'm going to turn this temperature down a bit. It doesn't need to be that hot. But all I'm doing is making a roux, and this is going to be a roux blonde, not going to be one of the darker gumbo roux. And this is going to retain a lot of thickening power. The more you cook a roux, the better tasting it gets. However, it does get darker, which means it colors things. And the second thing is that the darker you make it, the less thickening power that it has. So all we want to do is we want to take this to the point where you can start it smelling nutty. All we're doing really is we want to get rid of that grainy sort of raw flour taste that you would have if you just simply melted butter and combined it with the flour in and of itself. This will turn a little bit of a blonde color, which is what we're after. And it really shouldn't take long, 3 to 5 minutes tops. Possibly not even that, depending on how much heat you're doing and if you're going ahead and actually stirring it constantly, maybe even a little faster. But as anyone who is a gumbo aficionado or someone who's experienced in making that dish will tell you, it can take quite a while to make a really good gumbo roux and to proceed it through all of its stages. The other nice thing is that this stores really well too. Keep it in a sealed container and keep it in the fridge. Use it for gravies and stuff like that. This is like a kitchen staple. I'm starting to lose my heat now. Maybe I turned it down too much. So we're just about medium low. Now, I don't know if you can see this. It's just starting to turn a little bit brown. And that's good. And I think I'm going to need a bowl to put this in so we can pull it off. Give that just a second. What's he doing? Oh, he's off camera doing stuff again. Yeah, no. There we are. And that's the roux blonde. Yeah, that's done. So I'm going to turn this heat off. I'm going to pour it into my bowl. Make sure it's not plastic, something that will melt or char. Another thing that they will tell you, they call this Cajun napalm for a reason. You get it on you, and it burns like the devil. So don't do that. I've done it before. I make the mistake so you don't have to. All right. So that is the roux in the bowl. I'm going to rinse off my silicone spatula here so I can use it in other places. And as I said, this is just going to be hot, hot, hot. I'm going to set it back here just to be out of the way. And clean up my little schlorp that I've deposited on top of my stove. There we are. Let me check. Look at that. Perfect. So that is now what I'm going to call a maintenance heat. So I'm going to drop this down just a little bit. I don't want it to smoke. But now it's time to do the dredges on our meat. In the intervening time, I made an executive decision, and I've got a little bit of all-purpose seasoning, a couple of tablespoons. I'm just going to drop that in there and mix that all in, just for fun. Now, another thing that you don't see off to the side, I'll show it to you, is a cooling rack. This cooling rack is going to be used to stage our meat once we get it dredged up and in the flour. And the thing is that having it actually sit for about 5 minutes is one of the secrets also of good frying. So I've got my wet dredge, I've got my meat, and I also have a glove. I mean, I'm not really big on just having to dig the stuff out from underneath my fingernails the entire time. So there we are. So once I dredge these, I'm actually going to take them over and place them on that cooling mat. Oh, and here's one last trick I have for you. We're going to take a little bit of our wet dredge, and we're going to put in a couple of tablespoons in there. That's going to create some clots, I guess, if you want to call it that. And that makes those flaky bits that crisp up so good. We'll just get that worked in. Let me put that in the sink. All right, let's begin. So we've got our wet. Toss that in. Get it all coated up. You can shake off the excess. You're not trying to, submerge it in the sea, but we're going to toss it here. Get it all coated up. And our next magical trick is we're going to put it back in here. And we'll put it in the second dredge, the dry dredge, for a second time. It's building up quite a bit, as you can imagine, which is the point. So now I'm going to take this and put it on our cooling rack for 5 minutes. Now I'm going to go through and do the rest of this, and so instead of having you have to listen to me prattle on, I'm going to do the rest of these, and I'll join you back in just a minute. I've got all of my steak sitting over and resting comfortably on top of that cooling rack for a few minutes of hiatus. My oil is already up, but at the moment I want to divert my attention over here to this new saucepan, and this is going to contain the beef broth, the 2 cups. That's going in. I'm going to turn it up to medium heat. And I'm also going to find a spoon so I can assist my own self in putting in the better than bouillon. That's a tablespoon right there. Get this stirred in. We want to get it moving toward a simmer. This is a very basic but very good gravy. Because of the nature of the frying that I'm doing, it's kind of a semi-deep or extra non-shallow. I don't know what you want to call it. I'm not going to have much in the way of usable fond in the bottom to make a pan gravy. So I'm going to have to just kind of conjure it up on its own. So we've got that there. Let me check again on... Oh yeah, we're high up. Any higher, I'd have to actually take it off the heat. But as it is, I'm going to let that kind of sit off for just a minute until it cools down a little bit, because that is going to scorch it before it has a time to actually cook the center of the meat. But anyways, I've got my beef broth going along with its additives. I'm going to add about a half a teaspoon black pepper. You can go to as little as a quarter teaspoon if you want, no problem. And we'll adjust this as we go along. Now, the better than bouillon additive is also going to deliver its own salt content. So I'm only going to add about a quarter teaspoon of kosher salt in there. And again, we'll just adjust it as needs must. And join you back here when the temperature is all ready and the timing for that steak that's resting on top of the cooling rack is mature and ready to go in. I believe what we have now is an appropriate cooking temperature now for that oil. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to grab my steak. I'm going to put it in. We're going to do this in batches, 2 or 3 pieces a piece. I also got out another cooling rack because after these are done, I didn't want to put it on top of a rack that had been covered in raw meat and uncooked dredge. So there we are. This is only going to require about 2 minutes per side, so it ought to actually go fairly fast. While this is in here, I've got a nice boil that's going on inside of that beef broth in the saucepan. I'm going to give it one more stir to make sure that we broke up all that better than bouillon, and also to stir in the salt and pepper that we added. And now I'm going to add that 4 ounces, roughly, of mushrooms. So that's all in, and now we're just going to give these guys a little bit of time to stew. I'm going to need a pair of these. So, yes, they work. They've been tested. You have to do that every time. It's a rule. We're going to give these another minute, and then we'll flop them on over. Our 2 minutes is up. Let's go ahead and flip these over. Oh, look at that. Nice golden, which is exactly what we're after. Oh no! I flipped it over and turned it. That's my fault. That'll be mine. A big deal. There we are. Got a little bit of froth going there. Don't worry. Won't hurt you. It's not a problem. That's just an amount of dealing with the dredges reacting with the oil. Okay, about another minute and a half. We're now 2 minutes on the backside. So I'm going to pull these out. I'm sure they're ready. I lost a piece. Oh no. Put that back on. I'm going to go ahead, as these seem to be fragile, just grabbing a spatula, and place these on my cooling rack. Look at the big crispy bits. Those are good. Now, let me check on. Yep, okay, so we're still up at temperature. That looks good. I'm going to place the other 2 pieces in. Also keep an eye when you're using a lot of thick breading on the level of your oil, because the pieces preceding will soak up a lot. And if you're doing multiple batches, that level can go down quite a bit over time. So you may have to keep re-adding oil into that pan, and making sure that when you do add it, that it gets back up to temperature. So we've now got our beef broth going, and as we are already at a boil, now is the time to actually put in our roux. Now I'm going to put in about 3/4 of this, 2/3 maybe, and I'm going to drop that in, and we're going to give it a good stir so we don't end up with a biscuit in the bottom of it. So one of the things about roux also, as it's a flour-based thickener, is that you have to have your liquid boiling in order for the roux to actually thicken. If it's not boiling, it won't, and that gets a little confusing. So we're going to give this just a minute under the heat and see if we need to add any more to it. I'm not really sure that we're going to need to, though, taking a look at it. If we use a large spoon here, we can check to see its coating power. And you can see that it is sticking there. And I think maybe just a little bit more. It may not even be the whole thing. I want to have some thicker legs on the back of that spoon. Now is also the time to adjust the seasoning on this gravy. I'm going to set that there and grab a tasting spoon. See if I need to do anything with the salt and pepper. No, not going to touch it. Just as it is. Now, I'm going to go ahead and flip these over. It's been the 2 minutes. Looks excellent. These are cooked a little bit harder than the other one. Come on. I just don't want it to splash. There we go. I'm going to dial the heat back just a little bit. And looking at this gravy, oh, that's perfect. We got our thickener down right. And I'm throwing towels on the floor. Well, we'll throw that one in the laundry later. So there we are. I'm going to pretty much take this down to a maintenance warm on the gravy and turn the burner to low. This we'll look at in just a moment. Yep, we're ready. I'm going to turn the heat off on that skillet for the chicken fried steak, and we're going to evacuate to the cooling rack for 5 minutes. It's always 5 minutes. You ever notice that? Some sort of like constant of the universe. All right. So I'm going to get the rest of my dinner ready, and we're going to get ready for plating. You know what? Gloves, don't let that work out well. And thank you once again for joining us here at Eating Plebian. Our chicken fried steak is a success. Got the little crispy bits on here. They're crunchy, they're beautiful, they taste amazing. And of course, I got the gravy to go over it. I'll put a couple of little shots there, as I normally do for thumbnails and all the rest. But thanks once again for going along with me on this step-by-step video. And do me a favor and please hit the like and the subscribe buttons. They're kind of what's keeping me abreast, I guess, in terms of all the algorithms and everything that determines who gets to see what. My real goal is to make sure that people can eat at home for pennies on the dollar that they eat out at or get takeout at in this economy. And it's just a crazy thing to have to try to keep up with. You know, wages have not kept up with almost every other bill and metric that are charged against us all the time. We've got to make it somewhere. And if we can do it with your family around the table for at least one meal a day, you can stay involved in their lives, find out what's going on. And it's just the best way to, you know, have your family around you and keep everyone running. Thanks once again. Catch you next time.